Defense Authorization Act. And in its essence, the purpose of the NDAA is to focus on providing the material and the resources for our service members so that they can have what they need to protect the American people and our homeland. And I'm here with my colleagues today to oppose the NDAA in its current form, plus the amendments that are being foisted upon us for a number of reasons. First of all, is the Biden administration must be held accountable for its colossal failure, colossal, epic, historic failure in the evacuation from Afghanistan. The second is, we oppose the enforcement of selective service on women. We oppose also the spending bills that don't defund critical race theory, base training for federal employees. House Freedom Caucus members will not stand by and watch this insidious and deliberately divisive ideology become a normative part of the government, especially in our military. A vote for this is to vote to give a free pass to the Biden administration for what they did in the Afghanistan evacuation. It's a vote to force women to register for the draft, and it's a vote to allow deliberately divisive ideology to become part of our military training. This administration continues to allow Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, and General Mark Milley to serve our country instead of holding them accountable for their actions. The NDAA, as configured now, is $25 billion more than the Biden administration's budget proposal. It sends Americans' hard-earned dollars to an administration that refuses to take accountability for its failures during the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Those failures resulted in the loss of 13 young troops, a botched drone strike that took out 10 innocent lives, that left Americans behind, Americans that they don't even know how many are left behind. It left behind special immigrant visa holders and PR1s and PR2s. They don't know how many. They refuse to say how many. They refuse to say what their plan is to save those Americans from that place. They effectively gave an entire nation to the terrorist organization that effectively attacked us 20 years ago. They've handed more than $80 billion worth of equipment to the Taliban. And just 2 weeks ago, we came to Washington in the middle of a recess to demand that Speaker Pelosi call us back and vote on the impeachment resolution our members had introduced for Secretary Blinken. And still, silence. It's time the Republicans in Congress take every step possible to ensure that President Biden and his regime are held accountable for the devastating failures during the withdrawal from Afghanistan. The NDAA should focus on providing for service members the resources they need to protect Americans, our country, and put the interest of this country first. That's what a real leader would do. We don't have a real leader in the White House, and we have an NDAA which will actually reinforce that lack of leadership. So at this point, I'm going to turn the podium over to my good friend from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins.
Ladies and gentlemen, I had a prepared statement, but I'm going to step away from it because my colleague, the chairman of the Freedom Caucus, my friend Andy Biggs, pretty much summarized how we feel. We have varying degrees of passion regarding the segments of the NDA that we are united to stand against, but we are certainly united against this bill. The executive branch of our government, as envisioned by our founders, has equal authority in our nation, but enumerated powers and responsibilities that are associated with those enumerated powers. And it's with some degree of sorrow that we reflect upon the presidency of our inaugurated President Biden. And we look on his failures of this year, his epic and colossal rejection of the plan that he inherited that we helped structure with President Trump regarding the withdrawal of our boots on the ground from Afghanistan based upon the conditions on the ground and obviously moving our allies and our citizens and our military equipment out prior to moving our military forces and abandoning our airfield. It was insane the way the way President Biden moved forward with it. It's resulted in the not only the abandonment of Americans and their families and allies in Afghanistan to the mercy of the Taliban, but he abandoned American honor and strength in the sands of Afghanistan. And on our southern border, we've witnessed the disintegration of our sovereignty as a nation. So the repeated failures, which our founder Jefferson indicated would be, in his mind, would be a requirement for impeachment of a sitting president. President Biden has demonstrated repeated failures. We've called for his resignation. That was an appropriate first step, given the fact that many Americans, myself included, don't believe he's of sound mind. So as a compassionate nation, we should request a resignation prior to demanding impeachment. But I personally believe that our president should be impeached at this point, and I work with my colleagues on that endeavor specifically. This NDAA is filled with poison pills. It's been politicized by the majority party, our Democratic colleagues on the left, and for many reasons we would have exception to it. But the overriding cause was for us to stand aside from our NDA, because we certainly support our military. When have we not? But to turn over, $800 billion to an administration that has proven to be incredibly inept and disastrously positioned America across the world. Our relations with our allies and overseas operations, our southern border, the list goes on and on. Unconstitutional mandates for medical procedures on Americans and American businesses, the list goes on and on. So we're just not giving them $800 million on an NDAA filled with socialist agenda items. And I yield to my colleague, Chip, and Congressman Royal will carry on our reasoning here.
I thank the gentleman from Louisiana. I thank the chairman. I thank my colleagues for joining us here today. You're going to hear a lot over the next coming days from our Republican colleagues about why we should all be in lockstep in supporting the NDAA. Now, everybody here on this stage, certainly speaking for myself, we support our men and women in uniform. I represent Fort Sam Houston. I represent the Army Futures Command. I represent about 80,000 veterans. I stand alongside our men and women in uniform, whatever the pay raises and whatever material supplies that they need in order to carry out their job. But what I do not support is blindly supporting legislation that is critically flawed at its core because of, we're in the minority. Look, right now today, if you vote for the NDAA, you are voting to draft our daughters. There is no other position you can take. The current law of the land does not have a requirement that our daughters be drafted, okay? If this NDAA is passed and signed into law, then our daughters will be required to sign up in selective service and make themselves available for the draft. Under no circumstances should a civilized country, the United States of America, with the ability to have a volunteer force of the size and the caliber and the strength that we have, say that we're going to force women into being drafted into the United States military. I cannot put into words the extent to which that idea angers me and undermines who we are as a nation. And I cannot believe that House Republicans are sweeping it aside, sweeping it under the rug, refusing to talk about it, while they blindly march forward saying that the conference supports passage of the NDAA. I'm proud that the Freedom Caucus has taken a position against voting for the NDAA. I would implore my colleagues, my Republican colleagues, to join us in opposing the NDAA. And not just for this reason. I'm focusing on that issue in particular, but also because we're giving more money than they requested to a Department of Defense that abandoned our men and women in uniform in Afghanistan, abandoned SIVs, turned over Bagram, probably to the Chinese, certainly left it abandoned. $85 billion of equipment to the Taliban, literally aiding and abetting our enemies. The incompetence of this administration. And then they want me to trust them that they won't draft my daughter, my 10-year-old daughter? I assure you, not on my watch am I going to agree that we should make it to where this government can draft my 10-year-old daughter, and that I'm supposed to trust them after the debacle that just unfolded in Afghanistan. Trust them when a government is telling my people in my state they can't get monoclonal antibodies, telling them they must get vaccinated in businesses over 100, an unconstitutional, unlawful order by a president out of control and abusing power of office. While I watch my borders wide open and Texans getting absolutely decimated, ranchers getting overrun and people dying from fentanyl, while millions pour across our border, and the President of the United States is talking and lying about law enforcement, lying about Border Patrol, saying they're whipping migrants. And their White House communication director, press secretary, is just today, literally an hour ago, is up there saying, oh, we're horrified by what we saw. When they don't know squat about the border, don't know squat about what's actually happening, they're lying about the law enforcement that are down there trying to protect us. The NDAA is supposed to be about defending the United States of America, not engaging in social engineering experiments, destroying the Department of Defense, and saying that we have to draft my 10-year-old daughter. I'll now yield to my friend Noel.
Thank you. And I do completely agree with my colleagues. But we have to ask, why on earth would we give Lloyd Austin and General Miley a blank check? As we stand here today, neither of them have testified about the disaster which they created in Afghanistan. We still have no idea what was left in the hands of the Taliban. 20 billion, 80 billion in weapons. We have no idea how many Al-Qaeda prisoners were released from Bagram. The Biden administration's incompetent left us with 13 dead Americans because they were relying on the Taliban to secure the perimeter. We have no idea why the Pentagon droned an aid worker and 7 children, and then horribly they've lied about it and claimed that it was ISIS leadership. General Miley called it a righteous strike. No one has been fired or resigned for any of this, and instead, what is the military focusing on? Critical race theory and firing Navy SEALs for not taking the COVID vaccine. We still have no idea what General Miley said to the Chinese Communist government in a secret phone call outside of the chain of command. These aren't scandals from the past 3 years. These are from the past 3 weeks. Why on earth are we going to give these people a blank check? As usual with the swamp, the biggest scandal in the bill is the quietest one, the one that they are trying to sneak in and hope no one notices. This defense authorization, for the first time in our history, would require teenage girls to register for the draft. No one knows about this because the Democrats have convinced the media that gender no longer exists, so this isn't a big deal. But I want to make sure the American people know that Democrats, and sadly some Republicans, want to draft your daughters. This is wrong and it's immoral, but they're doing it anyway. We are definitely proud of the courageous women who have served and are serving in our military and defending our nation. But our mothers, sisters, wives, and daughters should not be part of this draft. This is left-wing woke agenda gone too far. I joined other members of the House Freedom Caucus in sponsoring the Don't Draft Our Daughters resolution and multiple amendments to prevent our girls from being required to register for the draft. If you don't want politicians who ran the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal to have the ability to draft your teenage daughter to fight in a war, now is the time to speak up. The vote is tomorrow, and the swamp wants to pass the bill. And I yield now to my
Thank you, Congressman Miller. We have an incompetent administration, an incompetent military leadership. We've got a president who's told the military the greatest threat to them is climate. We've got a president, as others who have said, who bungled, failed in the efforts in Afghanistan, gave away $85 billion worth of assets. We've got a president who's incompetent, and their accountability needs to come. We hold the power of the purse, and to think that we would give them $800 billion when they've given away $85 billion worth of assets in Afghanistan. We've got a Secretary of Defense who's there to fight white nationalism, to fight racism in the military. And as Ms. Miller said, we're trying to kick out our military members who are serving nobly, valiantly, courageously because they don't get a vaccine. I've had 2 Marines who I coached in wrestling in high school and my kids' teammates call me up and ask me, what can we do? We're going to be dishonorably discharged because we're not getting a COVID vaccination that we don't want and we don't need. We've got a chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff who wants to understand what white rage is, whatever that's supposed to mean. He attempted a coup on our previous president, and he colludes with China, and there's no accountability for that, and yet they think we ought to give them a blank check for whatever they ask for this military. We've been given a drink here that's, we're being told by our own Republican leadership, well, it's 90% good, it's 90% tasty, it's 90% pure, there's only 10% poison and toxins in it, but drink it anyway. And you have to drink it anyway because the Democrats prepare the drink, they make the rules, they serve the drink, we drink it every year, we have to drink it this year too. If it's a Democrat bill, and the Democrats call the shots, and the Democrats we have no control, let the Democrats drink it. Let's don't help them. And I yield to Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia.
Thank you. Well done. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us here, and I'm honored to stand alongside my colleagues in the House Freedom Caucus. What you see before you are members of Congress that are fed up with the ways of the swamp and fed up with leadership that fails us, telling us to vote along with a Democrat agenda that is completely failing America. The whole reason why we cannot support this NDAA, and I stand with my colleagues in doing so, is currently we have military leaders that are allowing America to be invaded. We do have an invasion happening at the southern border right now, just as Mr. Roy mentioned in his home state of Texas, and no one is doing anything about it. People here probably in this room spent more time on Saturday at a January 6th protest, and there were more Capitol Police and all kinds of security out there for a handful of people upset about people being held in jail indefinitely than anyone seems to care about the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people that daily try to come into the United States illegally, breaking our laws. That is called an invasion. No one is paying attention to that, especially the Commander-in-Chief, Joe Biden, and that is why he should be impeached, which is extremely serious, but it must be done. We have another situation, the Joint Chiefs. We have General Milley, we have Lloyd Austin, Secretary Blinken, that completely failed America, along with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, in Afghanistan, abandoning Americans, arming an radical Islamic terrorist nation controlled by the Taliban with all of your tax dollars. Guess what? $85 billion worth of equipment, military equipment, top grade, the best in the world, and the weapons to go along with it, and 13 military members that are killed, and they're still burying their loved ones. These families are. We love and appreciate our military men and women. My father was a Vietnam combat veteran. My husband served in the Navy. I'm so grateful for them, and I'm in awe of women who serve in the military. I think they're amazing. I think they're fantastic. But as a mother of, I have 3 children, and all 3 of them are at draftable ages, 18, 21, and 23. One son at 18, and both of them are my daughters, 21 and 23. I can tell you right now, my daughters do not want to have a career in the military, and that's their decision, and it should be their decision. You want to know why? I respect women's rights and see them as equal. So therefore, we should not be drafting our daughters, drafting young women when there's no war going on. We're ignoring the invasion at the border, but we're not at a war. We're not in war times, and hopefully we don't see another draft. We have 17 million men, 18 to 25 years old, that are currently registered in the select services. 17 million. We have 1.3 million active military duty men and women. So why on earth do we need currently, right now, to pass a law where young women have to sign up for select services to be drafted. It doesn't make any sense. It's purely a political agenda to destroy gender or push some kind of strange plan, which seems to be what the Democrats are trying to do the entire time anyways. So I'm honored to stand up here with my colleagues and unfortunately say we have to oppose the NDAA, which I can't believe that I have to do that, but we have a failed administration that doesn't care about the national defense of America, and therefore we should not fund what they are trying to do with this country because they don't care about national defense. They clearly care about us being invaded and abandoning Americans in foreign countries that are run by terrorists. Thank you very much. I can turn this over to Congressman Davidson.
Thank you all. I'm Congressman Warren Davidson from Ohio. After high school, I enlisted in the infantry. I got the chance to go to Germany when the Cold War was still going on and meet people who experienced their first hours of freedom. Since then, our national security policy has been adrift. It got narrowly focused for a brief window after 9/11. There's been no accountability from this body for years, and that's why we're seeing the failure in Afghanistan. So how has it happened? It's happened in a bipartisan way, the same way this bill's going through, in a bipartisan way. We've continued to set a standard here in Congress of no accountability for the top brass, even though down for the rank and file, there's accountability. I remember a time when I was in the 101st Airborne Division and a mortar platoon sergeant was fired, relieved of his duties. Why? Because he kicked over a mortar tube at a live fire range. Was that a bad decision? No, it was a good decision. It set a clear standard of accountability. Don't do impulsive, dangerous things. And even though no one was actually hurt, there was clear, swift accountability. As far as I know, his career went back on track and there was accountability, but not a career-ending move. In the Pacific Fleet, when we had ships crashing, the commanders were relieved. But at the very highest levels, in the highest of high stakes, when we're destroying America's credibility on every front with any ally or potential ally, with the way we're leaving Afghanistan, there's no accountability for the Commander-in-Chief. There's no accountability for the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, or the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Look, I've been in favor of firing General Milley since last June. But in light of the last few weeks, as Congresswoman Miller highlighted, the idea that there's no accountability and we're going to deliver the votes, it sets a horrible standard, and Congress cannot continue to do this. It should be bipartisan to demand accountability. And if it can't be, it should be the Republican Party that would demand accountability. And since it can't be, it will be the Freedom Caucus that defends freedom for this country. Because we're watching so many of our colleagues surrender and forfeit our country without even fighting over it. And it's far more than just the draft. It's a two-tiered system of injustice where there is a standard for the rank and file and a different standard for the top tier. That has to come to an end, and it needs to be set an example in the Department of Defense. Remember when Stanley McChrystal was relieved by Barack Obama? Everyone agreed with that decision, and that was over talking out of turn to journalists, not to the Chinese Communist Party. The idea that we're going to come in, and some of my colleagues are going to vote for this with no accountability in the Department of Defense is horrible. But then when you look at the cultural norms that are going on here, not only are they continuing to fund gender assignment surgeries for active duty members, they want to fund them for people in the VA. So, as has been said, the culture wars are big. The president, when he took office, he stood down every political appointed board in the Department of Defense because he was worried that the military would be politicized. And he stood it down while he's politicizing the military with an unknown number of diversity, equity, and inclusion political officers. As far as I know, they don't wear armbands, but they're really there to enforce the woke heresy code of the Democratic Party. He relieved all 18 members of the United States Service Academies, the Military Academy, Naval Academy, Air Force Academy Board, not for cause. The only cause was they were appointed by Donald Trump. The distinguished graduate of the United States Military Academy this year was General H.R. McMaster, former National Security Advisor. Clearly qualified. And will Congress set this standard? Congress set the standard knowing that there would be changes with 3-year terms. President Biden didn't fire them for cause. He fired them because he's politicizing the military. And the idea that we're gonna do that we're gonna deliver the votes, and people say, well, you know, see, in this, we can't really do that. No, you can negotiate though. You can withhold the votes until we get some accountability. Even if you don't do it in the text of this bill, you can say, we'd be happy to deliver the votes in exchange for something. If you don't take a piece off of your opponent's board, I'm pretty sure you lose eventually. We are losing without fighting. As a party, as a country, and I, for one, will not surrender. And I'm glad to be joined by these colleagues in the Freedom Caucus who took a position as a unified group to say, we're not delivering the votes for the NDAA without accountability in the Department of Defense.
Andy Harris.
Thank you very much. Like Mr. Davidson, I served during the first Gulf War. What a difference. Instead of your enemies surrendering their equipment, in Afghanistan, our allies surrendered their equipment. In 30 short years, we've seen the military go from a military that can win a war in 3 months to a military that lost a war in 20 years. It has to stop. The fact of the matter is that this administration wants the military to be a social engineering project. I guarantee you, Iran, North Korea, China, and Russia do not have diversity officers in their military ranks, and they're not spending money doing that. They're spending money trying to figure out how to defeat America. That's what our military should be doing. That's not what it's doing right now. Now I'm going to bring up 2 issues. The first, if our Secretary of Defense was so interested in making our military the best in the world, why would he be getting ready to fire 10% of our Navy SEALs? Highly trained, one of the fighting forces we are most proud of in the world, because they don't have a vaccine, without testing for antibodies in them. In an administration that believes in science, if you want to keep your fighting force intact, why wouldn't you test to see if those men in the SEALs actually have antibodies from prior exposure to the disease, which would provide them even better protection and make our military even better prepared? But that's not what that was about. That was about a command that made no sense and will result in a fighting force that is less prepared. Finally, on drafting women. This is a discussion our society should have. In fact, we should expand it to whether we have a draft at all. As the gentlelady from Georgia said, we've had over 1 million people in our Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, Coast Guard for years now. We don't have problem finding volunteers. And if we did, we have 17 million young men who are registered for the draft. Why in the world would we do that? Now, don't get me wrong, I have 3 daughters. Any one of them wants to serve in the military, God bless her. She would go with my blessing as a volunteer, not as a conscript. This is a societal decision we should be making. We shouldn't be making it in a bill that we've seen for less than 3 days, where amendments, the stack of amendments, and I urge all of you to go see a copy, is about 7 inches high, presented at the committee. 800 amendments. This is what was discussed. And an issue so important as whether we expand our draft to include the conscription of women. Not, of course, denying any woman the ability to voluntarily join our force and even to be in combat, but not to conscript them. For a variety of reasons, I'm glad the House Freedom Caucus stands in opposition to the NDAA. We need to rethink our defense structure. We need to reform the Defense Department as the one that can win wars, not retreat from them. Thank you. Sandy.
Appreciate my eloquent and passionate members of Freedom Caucus who came to talk to you today. We have time for a couple, 3 questions, I think.
Thank you so much for your time. I wanted to ask, is your entire caucus standing against, or is voting against the bill, or is there certain members that are planning on voting for the bill?
We are standing in that united. This is an official Freedom Caucus position. And the vote we had, I don't like to reveal internal workings, but I don't believe there's a dissent to our opposition. So let me just say that. As far as I know, everybody is going to vote against this for the Freedom Caucus.
Okay, and if I may, a quick follow-up. The $25 billion boost to the budget, you mentioned that quite a few times. And that's actually quite unordinary in a policy bill to have funding. Nonetheless, it was a large win for members of the Republican conference and some, more defense-aligned Democrats, we'll say. What kind of message does that send? I understand you're making a point that you don't want to send a blank check. Do you stand against increasing funding to the military at or above what the administration has?
So first of all, I think your premise is off just a titch. You said this is a policy bill. This is not meant to be a policy bill. This is meant to be a spending bill. And the Democrats have turned it into a policy bill. I don't think there's anybody up here that wouldn't say we want to fund our military adequately to make them the most functional, best equipped, best trained, just the best military in the world, have everything that they possibly need. But what you're seeing is that and we could discuss what the right dollar amount is for that. But what you're seeing is this has become a policy bill, and that's the way it's kind of been at least since I've been in Congress, where there's a continual incursion into the NDAA into making it more policy oriented. That's not what it's supposed to be done. It's supposed to be appropriated, and that's the issue. So next question.
I want to ask about infrastructure, particularly the House leadership coming out and voting against the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Which I know is something that Freedom Caucus has happened before. Did any of you have conversations with leadership about this that pushed them in that direction and what they said? And also, when you know what it means for your potential support for Peter McCarthy to be Speaker of the Republicans.
See, I don't want to comment on any private conversations we may have had, but I will speak on behalf of the Freedom Caucus that we are all very happy that we sent a letter to the leadership in August, encouraging that they whip against the infrastructure bill. We're happy that they're there, and we congratulate them and we support that move, and we'll join them in helping with our cause. Here and then here. That'd be right.
Sorry, but some news spoke out against extending restrictions to women. Does the caucus support there's a proposal to land fall? Does the caucus support doing away with the selective service altogether?
We've not, that wasn't an issue. We've not come to consensus on that, and so I can speak on my own, but I'm gonna leave that alone since we're here as the Freedom Caucus. We've not taken an official position.
And can I just offer one thought, which is that a number of us offered a number of amendments,
Yeah.
all of which were rejected, and we never got a chance to vote on them on the floor of the House, which would have taken the issue on multiple fronts in terms of taking away the addition of women to the draft, potentially getting rid of the draft. All of those things were put forward as amendments. They were rejected by Democrats. We couldn't even debate them on the floor of the House.
Has the caucus taken a formal position against it in the legal before? Is this like a legal thing that you guys do, or is it something, is it the specific things that this bill?
I don't know if we've taken an official position against it ever before.
Okay.
I think this is the
First.
first time. With that, yeah, Bob, you can have one comment.
One comment I would add to why I believe as a freshman this is unprecedented territory. Never in the history of our country has a president willfully and intentionally done more harm to our nation than what this president has been doing these past 8 months.
Yeah, and we've covered a lot of ground, and so I don't think we need to cover any more, but I think, Warren, you think we've done it one other time?
I think we did it one other time. So in the 5 years I've been here, I think we did oppose it one other time.
Yeah, that's right, it might have been. I'll check that. Anyway, in any event, thank you very much for being here, for your time, and we are concluded.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.